Hi, and thanks for coming by. My name's Adam Culp, and you're at Beachcast. I thank you very much for coming. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that's a little bit controversial. I'm going to be sharing with you why consulting sucks and why you shouldn't want to do it as a job. So, stick around and we'll get right on that. Thank you. Hi, I'm back. So, as many of you know, or as you may know, I'm a consultant. I do that as my job. It's my primary focus on a day-to-day basis. And to be honest, I love my job. I like doing consulting. However, I get asked quite often by folks, Adam, what would you recommend about consulting? Is it a job that you think that I should do? And quite often it's somebody who is very knowledgeable, who really knows their stuff, and quite frankly would probably be very good at being able to be a consultant as far as knowledge goes. And that's perfectly fine. However, there's a lot more pieces to consulting than what most folks consider. Now, I'm going to share in this video 10 things that really suck about the job. Now, that doesn't mean the job's bad. It just means these items make the job very challenging. I'm going to make another video, and I'll link to that up here after I get it done. But in the second video, I'm going to cover the 10 things that are awesome about the job and why you should do consulting. But that's not this video. In this video, I'm going to share why it sucks and some top reasons that I've found, as well as some other people. Now, I did a Twitter post recently and asked folks, please share what you think is good and bad about consulting. And I got a lot of good feedback. Much of it I already knew. Some of it was things that I didn't necessarily consider because I am kind of jaded. I really like consulting. So I tend to overlook some things that other folks, it really bothered them. So I've kind of incorporated those into the list as well. So let's get started. The number 10 thing that folks, that bothers folks is the travel, right? When you're consulting, there's going to be some travel because ultimately, if you're not traveling as a consultant, you're really not doing the job well, and you're probably not busy all the time. Because travel is a key part. It's a key part of doing the job and doing the job well. As we travel, we have to be on site for a few different things. Number one is to help you build the relationships, because as a consultant, you want to make sure you're building relationships because that brings future consulting gigs, right? So we want to make sure that we have, the travel is going to facilitate that. Another thing that travel does is it allows us to go on site to sometimes get access to the network or access to the code base that we might be consulting with. So travel is unfortunately a part of consulting. And a lot of people consider that a negative because again, it's taking you away from home, it's taking you away from the office, wherever you're familiar with, and it's thrusting you into a new place that you're not familiar with and possibly new people. You're staying in hotels and things like that. So that's why I put travel in here as a negative, as one of the things that suck, because it can really weigh on you. Now, the number 9 thing is that there's no schedule set. There's no schedule set in consulting. Typically, you're pretty much on your own to make your own schedule. And, as you go through, the thing is that many people find it very easy to get distracted without a schedule. Now, myself, I tend to set a schedule. If I don't set a schedule, I have a very difficult time of staying focused. I have a very difficult time of working out the work-life balance. So I have to have a schedule for myself. And I do pretty much the same thing every day. I wake up the same time every day, have breakfast, get ready. I get cleaned up, showered, the same as if I'm going to an office, because I do actually work from my home office. And then after that, then I'm ready to get back to work. And then I work my normal schedule every single day. And I find that that helps me stay on track. However, a schedule can be very daunting. It can, not having a schedule can be very daunting. Not having a schedule can be problematic for a lot of people. And it really creates a lot of failures for folks who are trying to become consultants. Now, another item that I'm putting in here is no upward mobility. As a consultant, you're not really going anywhere. You are always going to be a consultant. Now, this isn't 100% the case, but it is quite typical that a consultant is pretty much always going to be a consultant. You don't really, you might have a boss, you might have somebody above you, but the chances of you getting their job from being a consultant is going to be very slim. So that's why upward mobility can be very limiting in a consultant position. Right, so we list that, no upward mobility. That's another thing that can be considered as something that sucks when it comes to consulting. Number 7, we as developers tend to be more introverted than we are extroverted. And so as a consultant, that doesn't work. As a consultant, you cannot really be introverted. You have to learn to communicate with other people. You have to be able to learn to be more open and work together with other people. And of course, that goes hand in hand with the next item, number 6, which is communication. And I say communication. You have to do it times 3. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the previous one of being introverted. If you're introverted, chances are you're not going to really communicate well. Because you have to be somewhat extroverted to be able to carry on the communications that you need on a day-to-day basis in dealing with customers, dealing with project managers, dealing with your boss, also being able to get around, to do the amount of travel you need to do, you have to be able to communicate. So it's very important that that you're one of those people who can force yourself not to be introverted if you are introverted, and you want to make sure that you're able to communicate and be able to communicate not just often, but also be able to communicate well. You have to be able to be able to speak in a way that people understand. You have to be able to communicate in emails and and other avenues that you might be using for communication. You have to be able to do that clearly. So if you don't know how to write well, if you don't know how to formulate sentences, if you don't know how to spell well, you're not going to do really well. That is all part of communication. You have to know that. So that writing course that you took and the speaking course that you may have taken in high school is really important when it comes to being a consultant. So the next item, number 5, is you have to be able to swallow your pride a little bit. And to be quite truthful, this sucks. We as developers have opinions, and some of us have very strong opinions. Well, as a consultant, you can have opinions, but you have to learn to be able to swallow those opinions and swallow that pride sometimes. There are many different stakeholders. The thing is you don't always get to do the things you necessarily agree on. As you're working on projects, you might make a certain recommendation that something's done a certain way. That doesn't mean that the company is going to do it. Granted, they're paying you to give them that opinion, but it doesn't mean that they're going to follow that opinion. So it's really very difficult, and you have to swallow your pride a little bit and say, okay, well, we'll have to do it your way, but here's my recommendation. Another thing is everybody has an ego. When you're dealing with other bosses, when you're dealing with other developers, these developers, chances are many of them were sitting in an office happily doing their code, doing their sprints or whatever format they were using to do their development. They weren't necessarily expecting a consultant to come in and tell them how to do things. Sometimes the boss hired the consultant to come in and help the developers because the developers didn't necessarily realize they needed the help. The boss realized they needed help, so they brought in a consultant to do that. There's a lot of egos at play, and the consultant's job has to be to swallow the pride a little bit and be able to work with these developers. Sometimes you're always going to have on every single team, there's always that one negative developer, the person who's always against you. They're going to counter every single thing you say. They're going to counter every single recommendation you make. So again, you have to swallow the pride and deal with that. You have to learn how to spot that early as a consultant. And the thing is often there's also no buffer between you and the developers. There's no buffer between you and the project owners. So, the egos really play a big part. So the number 5 negative thing is swallowing the pride and being able to function as a consultant. Now, number four is always be selling. As a consultant, you always have to be selling. And now that's not a bad thing. Don't think about this as a used car salesman type mentality, right? This is where, as a consultant, you are in front of customers who are asking you to do something or asking you to provide opinions, asking you to provide some guidance to them. And they want you to give them that guidance. The thing is you always, as a consultant, you always have to be thinking of how can I help these folks next? When I finish my recommendation, when I finish this job that I've currently been hired to do, how can I work that into the next thing? Because as a consultant, we always have to be working, and the only way you're going to continue working is to continue thinking of ways to help the customer. Now, that's not saying invent things that they don't necessarily need. I'm not saying that at all. That would not be being a good consultant. But you do always have to think of what is the next thing that we can guide them on. If you're in a situation where you're helping a customer, for instance, in implementing continuous delivery, what's the next thing? Maybe unit tests. You did the continuous delivery. You set up the pipelines with them. You guide them in getting the continuous delivery working. Maybe they don't have unit tests, so you can guide them on the unit test, and then you can be the guiding person, the consultant, to help them on that roadway. So always be selling, and that's difficult. Some folks that doesn't come real natural to them, right? Now, the number 3 thing is problems. There's always problems. The only reason you're brought in as a consultant is because there was a problem. If they didn't have a problem, they wouldn't be bringing you in. So there's always problems, and that takes a certain mindset to be able to deal with that, right? Every week there's a new problem, because chances are every week or every couple weeks, maybe every few weeks, you're always working with a different client. Well, as you're doing that, there's always a new problem. There's always a new set of problems. Nobody comes to you without there being a problem. So it does take, like I said, it takes a certain mindset as a consultant to be able to deal with that and be able to handle the fact that you're always dealing with problems. There's always something to solve. And these problems are much different than what a developer faces, right? As a developer, most of us love solving problems. We love finding pieces of the puzzle. We like putting it together. We really enjoy the puzzles and being able to solve problems. As a consultant, that is much different, because you're solving those problems, but in addition, you're solving problems that the developers never even thought of, right? You always have to think ahead in many cases. So number 3 is that there's always problems, and that's challenging for a lot of folks to absorb. Now, the second thing is you're expected to know it all. As a consultant, when somebody hires you to come in as a consultant, they are expecting you to be the one person who knows everything they need to know or that they need to do. So they're expecting you to know it all. Now, imagine that for just a minute. Imagine that you're building an app every single week, and every single week you're doing it with a different framework. Every week you're doing it with a different set of tools. You're including different libraries with Composer, and you have to know how to work with all of them, right? It's really difficult. So you're really expected to know it all. Sometimes the thing is even though you are hired to know it all, it doesn't mean they're going to accept your recommendation every single time. Going back to one of the earlier points where, even though you're making the recommendation, it doesn't mean that they're going to accept it. So, so that's part of it. Another piece of always being expected to know it all is it's also very hard to find mentors. Myself as a consultant, because I do this all the time, it's very difficult to find mentors because everybody just assumes you know everything. Well, that's not always the case. I'm always learning. There's always something new to learn. That's one of the reasons why I created Beachcasts, is because it helps facilitate me learning. But it's very hard to find mentors. It's very hard to find people to reach out to and say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And even though pretty much everybody, at least in the PHP community, it's very common for folks to want to mentor and help other people. Oftentimes, the perception is that you know everything. Even with the customers, that you know everything. So a lot of people feel intimidated by that, and they don't necessarily mentor as much as you would hope that they would, because the perception is that, well, wait a minute, you know it all, right? Now, the number one thing, the number one problem, or the number one thing that sucks with consulting is that nothing's new, right? As working as a consultant, I'm always going into old things. I'm always going into legacy code. I'm always going into situations where the developers have already either programmed themselves into a hole, or they're trying to figure out how to get out of a hole, right? So there's no such thing as a new project. Very rarely. Now, it does happen, but very rarely am I ever brought in as a consultant to a company who says, we have no code. We want to create a great application from the beginning. Now, in the consultant world, that would be nirvana. That would be, please call me in and let me help you create an application from scratch and do it the right way. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Usually it's an old application, it's nothing new. And that is the number one thing in consulting that is probably one of the biggest things that sucks, is that you're not really getting to do new things. The only time I do new things these days typically is like on Beachcasts or working on some other project with some other folks in open source. So those are the 10 things that suck about consulting and why you shouldn't do the job, right? Now, I do have a few additional things though, because with consulting, pretty much everything that I covered is assuming that you work for a company and you are consulting, like I do right now, right? I'm currently working for a company, but I do consulting with many other companies around the world. Now, but what about those people who are self-employed? Those people who are self-employed and working as consultants full-time for themselves, there's a couple extra points to consider. One of those is accounting, right? Accounting and collections. As working for yourself, not only are you doing the consulting piece, but typically you're also doing the accounting, you're also having to do the collections. And if your customers don't pay really well, that can really be a pain. It can really be difficult. And that truly sucks when it comes to consulting. Now add to this the sales, so you're pretty much doing it all. You're doing the selling, you're doing the accounting, you're doing the collections, all of it. And then that leads us right into our next item, which is taxes. As a self-employed person, especially in the States, taxes are just are through the roof. Because pretty much think of it this way. As a self-employed freelance consultant, typically your taxes are going to be double. Because not only is the company having to pay your taxes on your behalf, but then they have to pay their taxes. It's basically double. The company is paying twice, you as the employee pay once. So taxes really are difficult. Not only that, you have unemployment tax for your local state, you have city taxes in some places, you have federal tax. There's a lot of different taxes. There's sales tax, depending on how you're selling your things. If you're selling goods versus services, then you might have additional taxes there. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that there's no sick days. If you're self-employed, there are no sick days. There's no vacation days. If you're taking time off, you're not making money, period. You're not going to have a vacation pay. You're not going to have a sick day pay. Any day that you take off is a day that you are not generating income for your company. Therefore, you don't have any income yourself, right? So those are things to all consider. Now, those are the items that I have for you, and those are the main reasons why consulting sucks and why you should not do a consulting job. Now, like I said, I'm going to do a follow-up video, not today, but I'm going to do a follow-up video with 10 things why it is awesome and why you should do consulting. So watch for that coming up at some point in the future. Please, if you like this video, please like it down below, subscribe so you know about future videos we have coming up, and I really thank you for coming. Please leave leave comments. Let me know if you can think of anything else that sucks about consulting. Put it in the comments below. I really appreciate that. Thank you.